Hello, welcome to our session. Hopefully you know where you are. We are going to be covering finance and operations licensing. And when I say when will it stop, I think you're all going to feel like that is definitely the question no one can answer. So welcome to the Kilcom room. You've got myself and Chris here. And first, I just want to take a second to mention our sponsors that have brought all of this here for you today. So if we just hand that over, Chris, I think you want to do a little bit of a shout out here.
Yeah, can I do like the movie voice thing? And
Do
a
the
great
movie
thanks to our
voice.
sponsor. So Script Runner, DQ Global, Proximo 3, Redspire, Agilicis, and of course Hitachi Solutions. Thank you very much. Without you guys, this event doesn't happen. And yeah, we feel really privileged to be able to chat to you about this. So yeah, thanks very much. I guess back down to intros, right? So you're up.
Yeah, so if you don't know who we are, then don't know how you've managed to avoid us at this point in time, but here we go. So my name's Kaila Bloomfield, and I specialise in finance operations, human resources, ultimately the ERP half or back office half of Dynamics 365 as a technical architect. Feel free to watch me ramble on Twitter as a D365 princess, or go onto LinkedIn where I try and keep it a little bit more professional, but sometimes fail.
Yeah. Thanks for that. So I don't know. I guess I'm probably the less talented version of Kaila in a way that I do some Power Platform stuff, which is pretty cool. So hey, I'm Chris. I'm quite well known for wearing horrendous caps and Hawaiian t-shirts. But yeah, so I do some stuff with the Power Platform at Avanade. What's pretty cool is that I get to work directly with people from the product group and build out solutions and really just help build out capability and capacity with people in the community as well. And if you want to follow me, catch me at Tattooed CRM Guy. Yeah, I'm not updating the alias. And yeah, I can't guarantee anything Power Platform related on that Twitter feed. So just roll with it, right? So off to the agenda. Let's do this thing.
Yeah, so at high level and at very high level, and this is just because we all know how distracted Chris and I can get. First off, we're just going to talk about why this issue even exists and the Microsoft general strategy for business applications. Then we will dive straight in to the licensing conversation and how Dynamics 365 and Power Platform licensing all interacts with each other, and the caveats and the nasty bits that people tend not to understand or get tripped up over. And then we're going to go into Microsoft 365 licensing, because every customer these days already is on a Microsoft transformation journey, and there may be savings that can be made that nobody's aware of because these licenses can work together. So we're going to cover that off as well. But we're going to try and keep it fun and entertaining. So we will pre-warn you. This is definitely not going to be a dry session. And let's try and not swear, Chris. That's a good start.
I just want to give everyone some history. So Kaila and I worked together at Microsoft, and
yeah,
the only way I could really explain this is that we didn't agree on everything. I don't know if we still do, but we'll see, right? And we don't really have a problem with with telling each other that. So yeah, it makes for a good friendship because like fighting is good, but at the same time, everyone knows I am always right.
So enjoy the journey, guys. This is going to be a journey.
I've just set myself up for absolute failure here. Right? Absolute failure.
Anyway, right. So first things first. What even is going on? Why have we got this problem? So back in the day, and to be honest, we say back in the day, this is probably not even 5 years ago, Chris, would you say?
Much? Yeah, I mean, this is actually people still think what you're about to say.
Yeah, right. So let's be honest, the Dynamics community, when you said Dynamics, it used to be CRM.
Yeah.
That was it. Dynamics was CRM. Anything ERP back office was AX at the time, or finance operations. If you said Dynamics anywhere in the community, it meant CRM. That was it.
Because everyone's scared of ERP. Like everyone loves CRM. Come on, we're sales and marketing.
Because it's too complicated for your brain to understand, Chris.
Yeah, Kaila, all Dynamics is sales and marketing. That's all it is.
So when you did projects, or when anyone did projects, if they were for back office, for the ERP, we didn't used to go anywhere near Power Platform. We didn't used to go anywhere near Dynamics. We used to do Azure, Power BI, our own apps, and Microsoft 365. And, you know, that used to be a conscious effort in some cases as well. So if I hand over to Chris.
Yeah. So wait, I just want to clear something up, right? So I'm looking at the top left, and I see that it's all very, very, you know, focused on like supply chain. It looks all very complicated, but when I look at the bottom right, all I can see is we've got our Dynamics 365 applications. I just want to clear something up real quick as well. In Dynamics 365, when we talk about applications, there's actually 35 plus apps in the Dynamics 365 stack. And one thing, when I say apps, I'm not talking about a Canvas app. I'm talking about an actual line of business solution, right? So I just want to really put that out there. The second thing is that, you know, when we were talking about Dynamics 365 from a history perspective, Kaila mentioned the CRM part, the customer relationship management piece, and then it transmogrified into XRM, which is like any kind of relationship management. We pretty quickly figured out that we had this really kick-ass layer underneath where we put data. Now, we've rebranded this 600 times, so whatever we're calling it this week, Common Data Open Service Flexiverse or whatever, now known as Dataverse, right? That layer has been democratized, and actually it's the building bricks for most of the, or all of the Dynamics 365 customer engagements applications, and it's starting to spread, right, up into the rest of the stack. Now, Kaila's going to clear up a couple of things later on, but just so that you know, when we're talking about the customer engagement applications, those are built on top of Dataverse, right? When we're looking at the rest of the stack, as far as D365 goes, that's primarily focused on Azure. But the thing I want to clear up is that Dataverse is made up of Azure components. Okay, so do you agree?
Yes.
Okay, so
Ultimately, what happened and where it's more complicated is this is how Microsoft sells it now.
Yeah. So wait, are you telling me that like finance and operations is not a CDS thing or not a Dataverse thing?
Well, it's not.
Oh, but Microsoft said, but it's all the same stack, dude.
Exactly. This is the problem. So finance and operations is still Azure hosted. It doesn't go near the common data service, data flexiverse, whatever you're calling it this week. And to be honest, that's conscious. It's literally conscious. Microsoft has strategically made changes to try and get all of the architecture to auto scale on finance and operations. And because of functions, because of how transactional, because of how heavy the load is, it doesn't work. Like literally, it doesn't work.
But Kaila, every time somebody talks to me about finance and well, the FinOps or the old AX layer or the new AX layer, they're like, oh, finance and operations. They say things about entities. And like we have entities in Dataverse, I'm sure they're the same thing. I mean, come on.
No. No. So this is a really interesting. So you'll all be aware of the most recent change of calling entities tables. An entity is not a table. It's not a table. I'm sorry. I'm putting it out there. It's not a table. Literally, an entity is a denormalized version of a grouping of tables. So in finance and operations, our customer tables, I think there's like 36, but that's one entity. Mm-hmm. So there's one denormalized version of a very complicated group of highly related tables in our database because it's that transactional. We need to normalize the data in the system to make sure that we haven't got duplications and to make sure it runs efficiently. They're not the same. And that's one of the key reasons also why it doesn't natively fit in CDS. So it doesn't work. It's not going to work.
And that's the point, right? Because I'm going to go a little bit of a history lesson back in NAM, pre-CRM 2013, Dynamics 365 now, we used to have two tables that lived in SQL, a base table and then a kind of a top layer on top of it that rolled up into an entity. And the reason that they've renamed entities to tables in Dataverse is because now we only have one table in SQL per entity, right? Now that's what they're saying. I haven't been able to dabble around in the structures underneath. But I guess that's probably why it works that way. So you're telling me in the AX layer or FinOps layer or finance layer, you have multiple tables that get rolled up into one entity. But in Dataverse, it's typically one table, which is the thing that you're using to put data in.
And this is the most interesting thing. So everyone says that everyone talks about the common data model, right? And have you noticed nobody talks about it anymore? When was the last time you heard anyone from Microsoft talk about the common data model? And that is because there is no common data model between finance and between CE.
Yeah,
and there was literally a guy employed full-time. I don't even know whether you know this, Chris. There's a guy employed full-time at Microsoft because his job is to try and align this front end and the back office side of Dynamics to be on one common data model.
So that's
literally a guy's job.
So that's why this slide is relevant.
Together.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess we've taken this and we're going to break the story and we're going to focus more on that type of a process right now, right? So, okay, cool.
A little bit, yeah, because when you sell and when you talk about licensing, this is now this screen that we're on. This is not how you need to talk and sell it.
So you need to be selling it like this.
How it's done. Now, This is why licensing is complicated, though, because with dual right, all of that data in finance and operations can get into the common data service, but it does impact your licensing.
Of course.
It does impact your solution design, and it doesn't natively sit on top of it the same as it does for customer engagement apps. So you need to sort of pretend in this conversation it looks like this. And we need to go on that same journey with Microsoft and think and believe that and sell it like it looks like this, even though we know it doesn't. Because underneath everything that's going on in the platform, every time you see security updates, they're actually making infrastructure changes that line these two up. And you just don't know about it. And they don't need to tell you about it because you're buying a SaaS service.
And that's a good thing. I mean, that's a good thing, right?
If they eventually pull it off, it is a good thing.
Well, okay, so now I think we're going to go down probably a very dark path, one which you and I have gone down a number of times before, chatting about this, and I'm slightly worried, right? So now I think this is going to be a very much an education session on my behalf, which it normally is around finance and operations. But I also do know we're probably going to get into an argument about things like multiplexing and stuff, which is good. But I think for everyone's benefit, just remember, we have taken what we've read in the licensing guide, okay? We have interpreted it and we've stuck it on a slide deck. Now, we have a rule, okay? Guide before guidance. So read the guide. It's actually pretty straightforward. Mm-hmm. The thing that we've discovered about licensing in the technical architecture role that we filled previously was that it stopped being a commercial thing completely and started being a technical thing. Yeah. So as solution architects, you can't get away with just being able to stick digital bricks together. You have to know the costs surrounding why they're stuck together and then feed that back up. So actually, you're no longer just somebody that builds and designs stuff. You also got to help with the costing piece. Kaila, am I right? Like, would you agree?
No, it's completely true. And if you are still within your organization trying to do the licensing just between, the sales teams, it's never going to happen. It's not going to work, and you're going to end up stuck because your customer at the end of the day gets a really, really different picture of their licensing agreement towards the end, or you build solutions that you're not making the most of what you can get for free within your licensing. And exactly. And that's also what we're seeing a lot of. It means that it might not be as strategic as a solution design. It might be overly complex in your licensing solutions because of it, or they just might be paying more than they actually literally need to. So yeah, we're going to dive in. This is the crazy bit, and we'll see how we go. So first, I'm going to start off with what you get as an absolute basic of Power Platform. So the real minimal if you're finance and operations, because we're going to build on that through the rest of this section. So as of April last year, actually, was it April 2020? I think it was April 2019 now. So
I think it was 19.
Yeah, I think it was 19. It's COVID. We're losing time, right? So as of April 2019, they finally updated the licensing guide to include data transfer between ERP or back office and what was at the time known as the common data service. And they brought in that within the remit of the users and the license users for finance and operations, so you could actually start having for free, the same as you have with customer engagement, access to do building of extensions on the Power Platform. We all know it's been a bumpy ride.
Yeah.
The data integrator, dual right, still has its moments. We know that. But for a full user at that point, if you activated data going from finance and operations, any of the modules, into the common data service, they literally have full access to the Power Platform within their license. You know, it is building model-driven apps, extending, importing Canvas apps into the application. You can actually embed model-driven apps now in finance and operations, which are also enhancing that functionality. So they have that. When it comes to activity users, anyone from the front office sort of customer engagement side, you don't know what an activity user is. And it's just because within finance and operations, you need a mid-tier. You can't just have your team member and your full user, because we have people that sit somewhere in the middle. It's more of a cost efficiency thing. They actually have arguably the same access as team member, but that's where it gets a bit, there's some niche little areas where they have a little bit more than team member, but not really. And it depends which guide you look at.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's one of those ones. But team members, ultimately, you can use the Power Platform, but it's not for custom build. So it's only anything that can be embedded as an extension of an existing process in finance and operations. So some of the amazing extensions I've seen is when you're creating customers, you can have a Canvas app in there to do a postcode checker, or do, you know, credit checks or pre-checks that are outside of the system that want to integrate somewhere else, or additional complexity. And that will just be embedded so they can do those checks in line with the business process within these screens. So that's a very high level what you do get. And do you want to just go to the next one, Chris?
Absolutely.
Now, the clear difference here of what's not in scope, if you are using Data Integrator, if you're using Flow, if you're using Logic apps, it actually doesn't count.
So Flow doesn't count?
This is the thing.
Oh.
It explicitly is stated that access is predicated on the use and activation of dual write data into the common data service. Wow. So you have to be so careful, because technically, if you don't have it switched on, you don't have the access. And
that is terrifying.
Well, this is the thing. And you know, when we were at Microsoft, I had this chat with some of the seniors within the product group of what they're doing and where they're trying to go. And ultimately, it's because they gave themselves a target to say, we want by the end of this year, all of our existing user base, or a good 90% of that user base, actively using Power Platform.
Yeah.
You know, there's a massive number of customers that are on 365 that have access to do this because of the auto updates. That means you can switch it on now, but don't. So you know, they're being quite stern on it.
So I've got two questions, right? My first question is, so finance and operations is an amazing platform, absolutely amazing. Why do they want their user base using Power Platform as opposed to things like X++?
So strategically now, for, well, I would say probably 3 to 4 years, they've been very firm on reduction of customization of the finance and operations app. And it's all to do with one version and auto updates and ensuring customers don't stick around on legacy platforms. Now, Microsoft will admit there are still customers that refuse one version, and they're trying everything they can to stop. And one of the biggest justifications is, well, we're trying to extend, we've got too much X++, we've got too many customizations that would conflict with, the overhead is too much to double check our custom code every month to then get your update in.
That's what it is.
With Power Platform, you take the issue away. And this is where it's key for ISVs, and I've had this chat with a number of ISVs. We were talking about it a lot while I was at Microsoft. And even actually, you've just missed it. Microsoft had financial incentives they were providing ISVs to re-platform onto Power Platform from the likes of X++ last year. So they literally were putting money in to try and get this done globally. So it's very clear on the strategy they're trying to do. It's very clear they're trying to reduce the usage of X++. And there were always rumbles about actually putting in more limitations on what you can physically customize in the finance and operations core app. So it's like a very thin line at the moment if you're still using heavy customizations, if you should really be going that route, because we've already had the sort of carpet pulled out of our feet.
Yeah.
when they started locking off all of the core models and started saying, no, you can only use extensions. And yeah, everyone put your bets on when the next lots come in, when they're going to try and do this. Because Chris, you know, right? You've chatted to Charles Lamana even. It is Power Platform all the way at Microsoft. The first party apps, so CE, Finance and Operations, their priority is even lower than the Power Platform as far as Microsoft strategy at the moment.
Yeah, you know, the point, I think the point is, right, if you take away anything from this discussion, the primary mechanism of extension on the first party app layer is Power Platform.
Yeah,
it's literally that simple. And I think my theory is they're not looking to rip out Dynamics from anywhere. They're not looking to replace Dynamics. First party apps are massive solutions, right? I don't like the term apps. You guys know that. I hate it. So they're massive solutions that have had years and years of investment from an IP perspective. That's not going anywhere. But the extension, the build, which is alongside the first party apps, the extend, which is on top of the first party apps, and the connect, which plugs into the first party application layer, that's all Power Platform. Cool. All right. So this is where it gets pretty icky from what I know. This is where it's going to get weird.
Brace yourself.
All right.
Brace yourself.
Okay.
So, dual right. Everything we've just said sounds great. Switch it on, you get access to Power Platform. So, does it impact your licensing? Not generally, no. And they literally, so Chris knows I had this fight with all of the licensing desk with the product group, because this is a fight all last year. This is very recent changes in literally the last 2 versions of the licensing guide. They clarified this. So everyone who I was talking to when I was still at Microsoft, you'll be excited we finally have the clarity, because we went around the houses on this a number of times. Does it impact licensing? Generally, no. So they have now clearly stipulated that switching on entities to dual right generally doesn't impact licensing, because what this means is, we'll talk about multiplexing a bit later. If you switched it on, would it suddenly mean someone who used that data in CDS would need a finance and operations license? That's the general. That's where we used to get tripped up and have lack of clarity.
Yeah.
So now, when does it impact licensing? And this is the bit they've clarified. If you switch on a restricted entity, so you're syncing data between finance and operations into a restricted entity in the common data service, and all of the CE guys will know these very well. It's been an argument point for years on restricted entities. Yeah. That will mean if you have that restricted entity switched on, and this is a nasty bit, if I'm a CE user, I do CRUD operations against that restricted entity in CDS, suddenly I need a finance and operations license. That will be classed. If you don't have that, then you're classed as multiplexing.
Right.
Then you're in breach.
So my initial response to this is, I'm so angry. That makes me so angry. Why can't I do that? Okay.
This is the thing. So even if you as a business user, you have no intention of ever entering finance and operations, because your full process is in, for example, sales, field service, any of the CE apps, if you're updating an entity that's a restricted entity and you've synced that to finance, supply chain, project operations, that is classed as them needing a finance and operations license. And the thing is, CE licenses are much cheaper for full user than a finance license. So finance would have to be your primary and your attach would have to be CE. So you literally triple your licensing costs by switching on that one restricted entity.
So, yeah.
This is where I'm going to hand over to Chris, because which entities are we talking about here, and do we really care?
Well,
and the answer
that's
is,
the thing.
We found 2 we think you should care about. You might care about these.
Yeah. So let's go through the list, because everyone freaks out about restricted entities, right? So can I be quite frank? I mean, so Kaila and I went through the list, and we've done this loads of times, right? So let's go through it. Let's see if this matters. So there's what seems like a really long list. The first thing I want to point out to you is pay attention to what's on the right-hand side. Okay, look at this. That doesn't matter right now. We're not talking about that. So think about it. if you think about sales, right? So Kaila, a great example of me wanting to sync data between finance and operations and Dynamics 365 could be an order or an invoice, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, so let's have a look. This is an alphabetical order. So if I scroll down and I go to EFGHI, I don't see invoice in the list here. I have the business process entity, which is the entity that holds the invoice business process. That's restricted, but the actual data in invoice is not. Let's go down to order. Element okay, there's no order.
Nope.
Order's not restricted, so there's nothing stopping me, and that doesn't impact my licensing. So those are examples. So let's take another one, right? One that everyone loves to shout about is case. Why would you sync a case entity with finance and operations? I mean, if you want to, give me the use case. I mean, we'll chat about it, but there's nothing in here that would make me want to synchronize it. Accounts is not restricted. It's part of the common data model. Contacts is not restricted. It's part of the common data model. So when we went through the list, we had a look at the different types of entities that we thought might be synchronized. I didn't really see many. I mean, a lot of these are metadata focused or hold configuration information. I mean, okay, estimate stood out a couple of times, but that's for PSA. Well, it doesn't matter because we've got project operations now.
Yeah.
Let's take a look, right? The one that really, really stood out to us, right? There were two. There was product inventory and inventory journal. All right. Those are field service entities.
Yeah.
Now, finance and operations, that might hold inventory. So if you've got a warehouse solution and you're pushing field service technicians out to go and move inventory around, that's probably something you're going to need to pay attention to. So product inventory and inventory journal, if I go down to product inventory over here, I definitely went past it, didn't I? There we go.
Yeah.
Pay attention to those two. Those are restricted entities. So if you're shifting data between that and that, that's where you're going to pay big, shiny bucket loads of earth money. However, the value that you get for synchronizing inventory between FinOps and a CE application far outweighs the amount of money you're going to pay on a license. You can build as many integrations you want. Yeah.
This is my thing. Realistically, actually, the warehouse management and elements of finance and operations, there's a lot there.
Yeah.
So arguably, these are the types of users that would probably need to access supply chain anyway.
Exactly.
So we you know, it's actually, this is all very good news. It's just be aware of the restricted entity list, be aware of these two entities if you're syncing. If you're doing supply chain and field service, be aware of this. So then you can protect yourself, whether you're an SI or a customer, to know that these users are likely going to have an attached license for field service and a primary license for supply chain. And that will be the cost model. Because what you can then do when you're talking about your business processes and your stages, you can limit the number of users that are impacted by that. Exactly. And you can build down the cost like that. So you don't actually have to suddenly say, well, half my workforce are suddenly in this pool of people that need these, dual licenses. You can then refine that down based on your business process to still ultimately make it cost effective as well, while still getting all the functionality you want.
Exactly. And that's it, right? So it's just cost versus value.
Yeah.
All right. So we don't have much time left, and there's a couple of things we want to talk about. So we've got a really good fun one here. So Kaila and I have spoken about this thing called multiplexing a number of times, and we decided on an analogy. So Kaila, have you been to a music festival before?
Yes.
Yes, me too. The thing that cracks me up about this picture is the fact that there's a Google band on here. Like, I laughed a lot. Anyway, so I remember going to a music festival in South Africa, and one of my mates wanted to get in. So you know what I did? I whipped off my little band and I passed it through the fence to him, right? Now, the best part was I gave it to him, and he went to the gate and he walked in. And then what we discovered was that there was a bar. So we did the same thing. I went and got a bunch of drinks because, like, I had VIP access. I was smashing all the drinks, as you can well imagine. And then I passed my band to him, and he went and got all the drinks. And that was cool, right? Because, we were getting a whole bunch of awesome stuff for free by using the same band. Have you ever done that?
No, to be fair.
Yeah, I was a bad boy in South Africa.
No.
Yeah. So, I mean, it worked pretty well. And then I noticed other people were doing it. Now, think about this. it's fine because that organization had catered for the fact that they were going to get a number of people coming through the gate. Okay. So they budgeted on the fact that if they're going to get 1,000 people through the gates on VIP access, they're going to make X amount of money. And what they're also going to do is supply X amount of drinks. Now, we kind of screwed them over a little bit because if we weren't the only people doing that, think about how much money they would have spent at the bar and how much money they actually would have wasted on entry fees. So ultimately, it ended up costing that organization a lot of money. And, we were just taking for nothing, which is a bit unfair, would you say?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that is the best example I can give of multiplexing. So if you go and look at
it's only one pot of money, right? And if you keep taking too much from the pot, then that price is going to have to go up.
Exactly.
Because everyone has to make a little bit of money at the end of it. Well,
at the end, the next festival that they have, they're just going to charge more money because they're like, well, we got nailed at the bar and we got nailed at the gate. So we're just going to charge people more. And actually it hurts everyone else, right? So I did ask for forgiveness, and I do now pay my dues at the gates and at the bar. And in fact, I pay a lot of other people's dues at the bar, believe you me. And when you look at multiplexing, it's kind of like that, right? So multiplexing refers to the use of hardware or software that a customer uses to pool connections, reroute information, or reduce the number of users that directly access or use Power Apps, PVA, or Power Automate. It's the same thing as, from a platform perspective as it is with Dynamics. So the example I'll give you is that if I could use, so think of it like this: Power Apps portals is licensed quite cheaply, right? I mean, you can actually, it's cheaper for external users to access Dynamics 365 data than it is for internal users. So what is stopping me from setting up a portal, surfacing all my Dynamics information through that portal, using the contact layer and giving everyone in my business access? Nothing. There's nothing stopping me, right? However, the way that I would phrase it is don't be a douchebag, right? And I'm being deadly serious. Respect the fact that Microsoft have invested a lot of money and time into this, right? Now, there were a lot of other examples here. Things like, using Flow to mitigate access to various applications, like, using SharePoint as a front end for information and then pushing data back and pulling data back into SharePoint from a dynamic solution. That's not cool. It's just not cool, right? You're still using information from that specific system and you're still leveraging functionality. So you got to pay the piper on that stuff. Mm-hmm. So what do you think? Do you agree with me?
I do agree. And ironically, later we will be talking about the order lines license. Because for finance and operations, there is an additional license if you're using an interface to create transactions. So here we go. When you have that situation, because we're just talking now about, okay, what about if we want to do this? We want to interface, because Chris has just said, rightly, if we try and funnel users that would be manually typing in the system through any other means, then that's multiplexing. Well, that can go into interfaces, because suddenly we're building an interface that creates purchase orders, or, that creates general journals. So hang on, isn't that technically multiplexing? Well, that is, because you're creating all of these transactions in the system and you're not paying a license for. And actually, this is the biggest, secret of the licensing guide for most people, because I've still never seen a deal sold where it includes this license, and almost every single deal probably should. Order line licensing is literally what you should be buying for transactions on these entities that you're importing via an interface into your finance and operations application. So if you literally have an interface that is creating vendor invoices, free text invoices, sales orders, general journals, you should be having one of these licenses.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, whoops. We've all been there, and guarantee you everyone's still there. It's not, if you're deleting transactional lines, doesn't count, but we don't do that in finance, so let's be honest. If it's outbound, doesn't count. This is purely inbound interfaces with these entities. Over a 12-month period, you should be estimating how many lines they are and purchasing an order lines licensing SKU to facilitate that, to avoid multiplexing. Because if you don't buy this, you are by definition multiplexing. So how crazy is that?
I didn't know that.
about this. So the problem is, and the problem Microsoft have, at the moment, as of today, there is no technical enforcement that's coming in, but they are trying to bring it in. And that's a secret, because they are realizing this. So when we talk about finance and operations, the licenses, really expensive. Infrastructure, really expensive. Why is it so expensive? Because things like this have never really been paid for. So if historically, the customers who have been caught out and then told about this, it's because they've decided, oh, we only have, 30 full users on our application. So the fast track team will design the size of the infrastructure based on that. But all of a sudden, you've got 10,000 orders coming in annually, or 12,000, 20,000. They're like, hang on, that doesn't stack up. You've got this many users, this many creations. You've got an interface running that's doing that, because no matter best will in the world, manually people can't create that many transactions. They're trying to then do technical enforcement of this. And you think that's making you pay more money, but in the long term, same as with multiplexing, if people start paying for this, then the architecture of finance and operations becomes cheaper generally, because people who don't have a crazy number of lines created for interfaces, suddenly they can pay less for their normal user SKUs, because the infrastructure sizing and overhead that Microsoft have to manage for their ERP systems reduces. So it's like we're saying, pay for what you use. Everyone else can then only pay for what they use. But at the moment, because of this skew and the unawareness in the industry, there's a lot of people that are not paying for what they use, but that's not even intentional. This is unintentional, just because of this little niche part of the licensing guide people don't know about and talk about.
Wow, that's a good point. I didn't even know that, actually. This is news to me.
So, I mean, It's crazy, right?
Well, I'm glad that you taught me something. Okay. So sort of coming towards the end of this whole thing, right? We've spoken a bit about multiplexing. One of the last things we want to bring up here is is portals, because portals is a really great way to get access to information. There's a number of different types of portals. So Microsoft, incubated a company called ADX Studio, popped out portals. Portals is sort of more democratized functionality that lives on top of the common data service, or dataverse, as we're calling it now. And you can authenticate based on the contact entity or contact table, and you can wrap security around that to an extent. Now, the reason that we're bringing this up is because portals has always been a great way to multiplex. It's very naughty. The other thing that's pretty key is that portals lives on top of Power Platform natively. Because Dynamics 365 Customer Engagement is a Power App, portals lives on top of that as well. You can start servicing finance and operations data through non-restricted entities and exposing that through a portal to users, but you've got to pay the piper once again, and that's based on the type of logins that you've got. You've got anonymous user logins, which are typically people that are going to browse information. I would not surface loads of data to them. The reason is because they are anonymous. Authenticated visitors are people that put in a username and password and authenticate. You can see what they're accessing, and you can wrap security around that data, whether it be CE data, platform data, or FinOps data. And then finally, employees, you will require a Dynamics 365 or Power Platform login to get in. Now, if you're touching that FinOps data through restricted entities, even if you're accessing it through a portal, you need a license. The other thing we wanted to bring up is that a lot of people make the assumption that an internal user is just somebody that has a login, and it's not. In fact, Kaila educated me on this. Internal users are employees, agents, contractors, and other vendors. So you will need to be licensed properly as an internal user, one of these people, to access that information. Okay, so do your sums, do your math.
Oh, no. What's really, really key here is it's not actually really a definition of whether they're internal or external users on a business sense. It's the physical business process or task you expect these guys to fulfill. That's what defines whether they need an assigned license or not. Within your licensing agreement and the money you pay, you don't have to license for external users because they're covered in and taken into account in the licenses you do pay for internal users. But if that person is going to be doing a business process that would be classed as an employee business process, they are classed as an internal user, whether they're contractors or not.
Yeah, I absolutely. And I think, it was pretty vague up until now, right? Yeah. So just bear that in mind. Last little bit. Okay. is around M365. I'd love to tell you this because do you know that you can access Power Platform functionality directly through your M365 license? So you can access Power Apps, Power Canvas apps, you can access Power Automate, Project Oakdale, which is now called Dataverse for Teams within your O365 license. And there's a number of other really cool things, right? But the moment you start reaching out into premium connectivity, so this is non-premium connectivity, I'm going to call it is personal productivity, okay? Accessing Dynamics is not personal productivity. That is business productivity. Accessing Salesforce is not personal productivity. So if you're going to be doing business productivity solutions, you need to leverage the plan licensing or the user licensing from Power Apps or the per user or per organization licensing from Power Automate. It's just how it is. One thing that I will tell you is that there are pre-generated paths like this. And every single time you start accessing solutions, start looking at the paths. As an example, you don't need M365 to use Power Apps, Canvas apps. You just need an active Azure subscription and you can use the G Suite connectors, right? So start thinking about that type of thing, okay? Now, the pathways are totally up to you, but just remember from a finance and operations perspective, you do get a large amount of Power Platform included, okay? Definitely take a look at the guide. But I really need to tell you that when you start looking at the wider stack from an M365 perspective, you can do a lot. But don't assume because you've got M365 that you get access to finance and operations data, because that is not the case.
But there's interesting use cases, right? So literally the other day, I was talking to someone about the want to create or gather information from business users about invoices that need creating. And they're trying to think of a way to do this. So ultimately, actually, a realistic solution is you can create a Forms Pro to gather that basic information, and you could use an order lines licensing SKU to then import that data into the application. That's a legal way to do it. So you have these business users that have Office 365, they have access to forms, they can use that form to give you the information that you're looking for, and you can then import that into finance and operations covered off by an order licensing SKU, which means you are not technically multiplexing. You are importing data that's gathered in another system, and you're covering off your licensing requirements with the order lines licensing SKU and Office 365. So you're enabling your business to use the licenses they have to gather that data without suddenly having to train everyone on how Dynamics 365 works and give everyone a Dynamics 365 license. Suddenly you don't need to do that.
So it sounds, yeah, I mean, it sounds to me
clever, right?
Yeah, and that's it. It sounds to me like the landscape is not always going to be one license. There's going to be a multitude of them.
Yeah, every single, let's think of the basics. If you're Dynamics 365 now, you have to have an account in Active Directory. So you have to have either an E3 or an E5 license as a base anyway. We need to stop thinking about our business requirements as something that just is facilitated by Dynamics 365.
Or just M365 or just Power Platform. There's every single time I talk about this and we have this discussion, you have to take off your Dynamics glasses, your M365 glasses, and your Azure glasses, and you need to start thinking about the business as a whole. Not everything is in one bucket. It can't be. There's a scale, right? And this is just an example. There are hundreds of paths. And what we've actually done for you is in this deck, we've included a pretty detailed table of what you can get with Power Platform and D365. Okay, so it's definitely worth having a look at this and the type of technical functionality you get, right? But please remember, we're not saying throughout this entire presentation, one thing works every time. What we're saying is that it's the greatest consultant response in the world. It depends.
Yep. And the thing is, we need to, solution architects today, enterprise architects today, need to be looking at the Microsoft estate as a whole.
Yes.
We need to look at these other things. We need to look at these other solutions, because in totality, the more value the businesses see they're getting from their licenses, the more they're going to invest and build and use these tools. Everyone will always say, and this is Chris's absolute pet hate, well, Dataverse, that's expensive. That's not expensive. But the thing is that those people are probably not understanding the access they can have and what they can do for their business with this, within the remit of these licenses.
Exactly.
or they've been licensed in a way where they're probably paying more than they should just because it's not using the right combination of licenses.
You know what? I'll tell you something to end the session off, right? Here's how it works. With licensing, all right, you're going to pay somebody. Say you got £10. That £10 is going. You're either paying for licensing or you're paying a ton of money for services to replace licensing. You choose. You pay for the services and you have technical debt. You pay for the licensing and you have a supported platform. Right. So
it's question time.
Yeah, so
all of
we're
the
happy
nasty
to
ones
take
go
questions.
to Chris, and I'll just laugh. I'm going to enjoy it.
Yeah, well, I mean, we didn't fight completely. I mean, that was good, right? So I'm pretty amped about that. And honestly, thank you everyone for listening to us waffle. We're happy to do it all the time. And Kate, do you want to say anything to wrap up?
No. Let's see what questions everyone's got.
Awesome. All right, everyone. Rock and roll, and we'll be chatting soon.